So we are here with the incredible Bill McDonald. It is September 16th, 2023. Bill, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me. I appreciate it, Bill. Can we start really quickly and talk a little bit about your background?
Absolutely, and it's a long one, but suffice it to say that I'm a United States Marine Corps veteran in aviation. I'm also a former undercover private investigator working with agencies out of Los Angeles that sent me to overseas as well as across the United States locations and venues. I am currently a sworn badge-carrying law enforcement professional here in the Southwest Desert, and specifically corrections in Arizona with the worst of the worst down in Florence.
Okay. And before we even get into Roswell, Bill, can you take me back in time to 1997 at the 25th anniversary of the Roswell incident? You were there, Bill. Tell us what it was like. What was the whole experience like?
Okay, 1997 was the 50th anniversary.
Right.
And I was there specifically because I had completed the first leg of a 5-year investigation into the entire Roswell case situation.
Okay.
The situation was that we had 11, and I would call them thoroughly responsible, eminent persons who had done complete background investigations on a number of the witnesses. But they had only loosely touched upon 2 critical issues. And let's get to the meat of it. What's the fastest way for a good detective when you have some kind of a paranormal object or a biological? What's the fastest way to determine who's telling the truth and who's not? You spend months and years tracing people's curriculum vitae. You spend months and years finding logbooks proving that they were where they said they'd be 50 years ago on that date. July 4th, 1997 in Roswell, New Mexico. There's a faster, simpler, easier way. Folks, what did this thing, this object, this conveyance look like? Notice I'm using language that doesn't salt anybody's memory.
Let's turn that off real quick. Keep going. Just keep going.
The other thing is, if there were biological anythings or anything that was motile or mobile from the interior of this thing, what kind of structure, what kind of anatomy, what kind of textures, what kind of smells, what kind of impressions did the witnesses have of something that would function perhaps like a flight crew on a space shuttle?
Right.
It was very simple. I worked the case, and I contacted everybody involved, and I even got in touch with some people making a movie, a drama on the subject. And the result was I also got in contact with the Tester Corporation. I ended up with almost 250 witnesses, of which 228 actually were in the area. Winnowing it down to 28 witnesses that actually claimed before they died that they had seen something that was a vehicle or a conveyance that could fly, and occupants, biologicals, inside. These 28 witnesses allowed me to build a general composite. A composite is where you take all these witness testimonies together, and it's just like if you have 5 people who witnessed a man in Los Angeles shooting another man on a street corner. You get multiple witness statements, and you simply put in all of the characteristics into your sketch drawing, your sketch pad drawings, using blue pencil, graphite pencil, and eventually ballpoint pen in order to establish the look of what they're describing. It was simple. It was easy because everybody was describing the same general shapes and characteristics, but from different angles. It gave us enough that me, with the Tester Corporation, and later with Michael Schratt, who is interviewing me right now, was able to completely, with AutoCAD and all kinds of computer programs, because he's the computer wizard, I'm the sketch artist. I'm old school. We put it together and we ended up with the general composite of the Roswell UFO, aerosurf, aerospace, arrowhead, batwing type of vehicle. Its cross-section, if you could draw one, would be similar to a species of porpoise, a species known as the Doll's porpoise, with a specific kind of dorsal fin that was almost identical to what the witnesses described for the twin inwardly canted fins that were at the edges, toward the edges of the wings of this vehicle. It had wings. Some people compared it to Batman's Batarang. That was inaccurate based on the total composite, but everybody agreed that it was winged. Everybody agreed that it had utterly no seams. Everybody agreed that the belly glowed. Everybody agreed that when it crashed, major portions of the hull crumpled forward toward the front end nose that crashed into limestone rock. Well, guess what? They all described something that some of the witnesses thought was more like a cockpit canopy. Other witnesses described it as just a shiny thumbnail type of covering on the front bow of the vehicle. In the end, we looked at it as possibly a forward sensor array shield for a two-tiered forward suite of instrumentation that would have been the sensors for the vehicle for looking out front, like forward-looking infrared, or looking off to the sides, like side-scanning sonar, but in full electromagnetic spectrum.
Okay. Good job, Bill. Now, when you were there at the 50th anniversary, was John Andrews there as well?
John Andrews was not with me. John Andrews was not well.
Okay. Okay.
But we did manage to release in 1999 or 1997 the second kit of the Roswell UFO, and instead of this kit being pristine, like the the polystyrene plastic model kit that was the pristine version of the Roswell UFO, we had it in resin crumpled. Mm. The crumpling was done by me by taking one of my kits, building it, and then deconstructing and scratch building the exploded out portions of the left side, dorsal portion of the left side wing, and how that basically went up against also the left side of the hull, forming a very deep gash that accessed the cocoon-like interior that had been filled with a fluid that sustained 7 flight crew members, generally described as the size of kindergarten to first grade children, bald completely. Their eyes were slightly larger than normal. They were also slanted in an Asiatic style, most similar to little Filipino children or perhaps Mongolian children. And that the skin, when you looked at it up close, was like the tiny, tiny beaded scales that you would find in albino baby newborn geckos, like those species that are loose all over Hawaii.
Okay. Bill, please describe your interaction with John to produce the tester's Roswell model.
Okay, this takes some background.
Right.
In 1993-ish, Bob Lazar had come out with a sports model of the classic disc UFO that was also very similar to that which was described by Edward Billy Meyer, someone that I did not find credible for a lot of reasons. But I have since softened a little bit because credibility is dependent on mindset, attitudes, and mental health. And there's plenty of people who can describe things that they don't understand. But you have to remember, anytime somebody tells you something that they absolutely believe, my God, they're telling you the truth. It might be their truth. They might be psychotic. They might be confabulating, confabulating, which is a form of filling in the gaps in your memory and coming up with a story that makes sense to you to make up for the fragments and the shattering of your psyche based on an extremely traumatic experience. And we'll get more on that later. I'd like to diverge for a moment and stage this a little bit.
Yeah.
Right now, today's date is the 16th of September of 2023. In May of 1992, I started to take this Roswell case very seriously. I'm coming up on what, 26, 27 years, something like that, of solid, hardcore investigation, interviewing people on their deathbeds. That's my specialty. I'm an old-fashioned gumshoe private eye. I entered into the workforce when I was a freshman in high school. I've been working every day of my life, both self-employed and working for employers. Sometimes those employers were law enforcement, including now, and sometimes those employers were the military, i.e. the United States Marine Corps. I had a lot of contacts and a lot of friends that would pay me to go and check out certain things and report back to them, and they wanted who, what, when, where, why. They wanted details, just like the scales on the skin of newborn baby geckos. I was uniquely qualified to take a good look at the Roswell crash retrieval because I had a background in military aviation through the United States Marine Corps programs with the FA-18 Hornet Strike Fighter, the A model and the B model. Before I was out of the Corps, I'd also had the privilege of working on the Charlie model and the Delta model. Charlie and Delta were extremely upgraded compared to the original F-18As, which are still the F-18s that are flown by the Blue Angels right now today. The airplane was a miracle. It was a fourth-generation fighter, and it was a dogfighter, and it still is. The Navy's come out with a more advanced 5.5 version of it, which is your Echo and your Foxtrot models, and they now are more stealthy because their inlets are not round anymore. They are very similar to an F-22's, and they have far more wing area than the originals had. And they also, the leading edge extensions on both sides, there's a lot more of that areas too. So the lift is completely enhanced, but yet those twin F404 engines, those things, amazing. It gave it so much more thrust per weight ratio. The F-16, the General Dynamics F-16 also enjoyed similar ratios as far as thrust to weight, more lift and the ability to climb at extreme speeds vertically. The dogfighters gave me a concept of the texture of an aircraft, the fasteners on an aircraft, the materials used, the paint, the corrosion, the configuration, perspective, and even just good old, if you're going to draw an airplane, you got to place it on the page in such a way that your eye circles and always ends up back in the middle. Oh yeah. So I became an aviation artist, but at the same time I was brokering exotic reptiles and pets, including some that I got from some of my law enforcement friends when they would have some rather profound busts, but there was live animals that needed a proper home, that sort of thing. So because of my knowledge and the fact that I'd started my first jobs were in the pet industry when I was like 12. I had also worked at Lion Country Safari, which isn't there anymore. I had also had some time at the Wild Animal Park. I'd spent time in Australia, and I've spent a lot of time in Central America and Southeast Asia in a number of locations where I deal with exotic mammals, exotic reptiles, exotic arthropods, meaning things that carry venom. These are all hobbies that I love and adore. My sport is I'm a surfer. I consider myself well-rounded. I have a successful relationship as of this date, 28 years. We'll have been married 28 years in another 5 months. It was a whirlwind relationship, and it's lasted, it's gone the distance, and I'm very proud of that. This is a detective job, putting Roswell's vehicles and their flight crews into perspective, into coming up with something that we perceive that we can then render as a final conclusion. Many reports of investigation have a conclusion section. That was less appropriate with the Roswell case. Why should I describe it to you in words when I can show it to you in pictures? Mike will receive plenty of JPEGs of the very famous 22 drawings that I made of the Roswell UFO, and also the photographs that I've obtained from a certain grandson of a certain witness whose grandfather actually built models of this vehicle, demonstrating to us that there was an entire stack of attached pieces forming a much larger interstellar craft. Its entire configuration, its overall shape, somehow visually absolutely demonstrates the theoretical physics and the descriptions that Miguel Alcubierre of Mexico, very famous physicist at their big mathematics and the physics colleges and institutes south of Mexico City. Miguel Alcubierre in 1993 came up with the double bubble space warp concept, where space compresses in front of you while expanding behind you in order to push you in a workaround of Einsteinian physics that makes faster than light travel possible without actually violating any laws within the four-dimensional space-time continuum that is our perceivable reality. And he was able to demonstrate the mathematics. His papers were peer-reviewed. Moreover, they were picked up and described to other witnesses of mine by the late Ben R. Rich, who inherited Lockheed Martin Skunk Works from the Clarence L. Kelly Johnson, the great Kelly Johnson, who maintained a tight-fisted control even from the hospital when he was dying in 1990. I can't remember if his actual death is in early 91, but he was fighting for life and running things from his hospital bed in 1990. All the consequences of old age. Ben Rich died of lung cancer in 1995, January, I believe it was either the 4th or the 9th of 1995. Ben Rich confirmed before he died that there were 2 items that Kelly was dealing with, and Ben was one of the junior engineers on the team. The item was the U-2 spy plane, all its variants, and it was Kelly's miracle, and it was the plane that Francis Gary Powers was flying when he was shot down in, it was either, what, 61 or 62?
May 1st of 1960.
1960. Okay, so in 1957, Ben Rich had been assigned to improve the engine inlets, as in their actual shape and structure as they encounter the air mass at speed in 1957. And then, of course, the CIA was flying those planes, and they got the big straight wings and a lot of wing area for extreme high altitude flight at subsonic speeds at extreme altitudes over 60,000 feet. Meanwhile, Kelly was working on Project OSHKOSH, and that was what would become the A-12. A variant of the A-12 is still known as the SR-71. They simply stretched the chines forward to blend biomechanically with the nose and to right there to the point of the nose. The SR-71 is a miracle of aviation. It's also the first airplane to truly morph, and this is straight from Ben, wing camber into a fuselage form. Now, I like to tell narratives, and I like to tell them in the order in which they happened. But fast forward to me in Laguna Beach at a Kinko's circa 1995-ish. And this guy comes up to me very upset because I'm using old color Xerox technology to literally Xerox 8x10 copies of the drawings that I'd done for testers when I had successfully sold my idea to them as far back as 1995. And Randall and Schmidt's book had already come out, their second book called The Truth, about the UFO crash at Roswell, which was a sequel to the UFO crash at Roswell that was written by both Kevin Randall and Don Schmidt. And their witnesses were the people that I had worked to flesh out the drawings originally. Another thing that was very, very, very important was I had a secret baseline that very few people knew about in 1994 for the flight crew, which were biologicals, because that's what the Army guys told Leonard H. Stringfield, who was also dying of cancer when I finally got introduced to him over the phone. I spent thousands of dollars on phone bills interviewing Leonard. And Leonard taught me 2 things. All the baseline data that I needed for the flight crew, the anatomy of the bodies. But he also taught me that no matter what, no matter how many times people question your veracity, name your witnesses. Well, there's journalists who go to prison because they won't name their sources. It's that kind of honor that Leonard explained, as he told me that just like he wouldn't give the names of the witnesses to Stan Friedman, he wasn't going to give them to me either. but he liked my approach. And this is the magic of how I got away with what I accomplished. And that was quite simply this. While everybody else was spending all that time trying to prove that General Arthur Exon and Nathan Twining and Frank Kaufman, the big one, oh, he's a big liar and all this other stuff. Sure he was. He was the United States Army Counterintelligence Corps. Guess what those guys learned when they were in the school of becoming spies? How to lie successfully. It's called pretexting. That's part of the detective trade. And what else? How to forge documents when you're a government spy. Hell, even physicists like Hal Puthoff are willing to admit that this kind of thing makes sense. So why do I believe Kaufman and another guy named Tungate, who might be a murderer, but why do I believe these guys when other people, well, their reputations are ruined. We can't believe anything they say. Len's data. Leonard H. Stringfield's data. He gave me an exact description of the bodies. I would know in an instant, he said, if there was any divergence from that descriptive-wise, based on my knowledge of how people use language as individuals. No two descriptions are ever identical. None, never. Some are damn close, some are far off. But in many cases, they're describing the same exact object, person, animal, or thing. It's incredible, absolutely incredible, that everybody's brains work in such an individual way. Mike, I can take you and 5 of our colleagues or 5 of our co-workers who are trained observers in both your profession and mine, and we can go stand out on a street corner right here outside of the big complex where the tribal council is, right here for the Autumn Peoples, Salt River, where the tribal manager is. And we can watch 2 cars come together in a big crash in the intersection. And the Salt River police show up. And they start interviewing each one of us. What did you see? You would be amazed at the radical difference in each one of our descriptions and how we convey them, even though we were standing together as a group and watched the accident come together. No story is the same. So what do those cops do? They look for common elements. They look for common trends in the conversations. These are non-confrontational interviews. They are not interrogations. They look for information that dovetails. It's called corroboration. And that, along with the statements from the drivers and from any other witnesses on other street corners, along with the physical data, such as the tire marks and where the debris is laying in the road and the positions of the cars relative to each other, including the directions that their wreckage is pointing in, will determine the final outcome and the conclusions of that police report. I managed to get 1 vehicle and 1 body type functioning at a species level from 28 witnesses. 28. And it was a struggle. And a lot of them wouldn't talk until they were looking over the shoulder and the Reaper was maybe 15 minutes away. Half of them were dying of cancer. It scared a lot of people in the UFO community because what if the cancer was induced somehow? No, that's another fallacy. There's two kinds and only two kinds of death by natural causes. The deaths that occur from disease and aging that involve cancer, and the deaths involved with aging and diseases that involve organ failure without cancer.
Okay. Let's take our break now, Bill.
Break time.
Yeah, break.